I can actually fly through a little bit this because you guys are all returning this session. So thank you for coming to the second of three. Nina and I work for NESS, and so we're on different parts of the B-WET grant. And this is the second of three virtual, and we have a fourth optional in person if you're here in the greater Connecticut area, if you're in New England, to come on down on April 27th. And so I'll be sending reminders out on that. If you come then, you will see the two educators down below, Lisa and Gary. They have been hard at work, a part of this grant, basically helping enhance bringing watershed education to their students in their schools, and identifying the best practices they use to make sure it's engaging, fun, experiential, and reflective of all of the hard work they've put in the past total of 3 years with us. So they'll be presenting all that. And NESS, just as a reminder, is our whole mission is to empower students with a love of learning using ocean-based experiential programs. So that's sailing, kayaking, safe powerboating, windsurfing, fishing, whatever we can do. We do in-school, after-school, homeschool programming throughout the year, as well as a summer camp program that Nina right here runs on our adventure sports and marine science side. Everything we do is standardized, so we are fortunate enough to be NEASC accredited, which means that we align everything we do with CASEL social emotional learning standards, ocean literacy principles, and the next generation science standards. We have a whole catalog that we can bring to your students, but more importantly, share the skills during this B-WET workshops that we use for you to reach students in your area too. And so that's just about us. You know how to get in touch with us. You've been talking to me. I just need to say it for the recording for anyone listening post. Hope you had a good time. And I am more than excited to introduce you to Val. Val, the seaweed gal, coastal scientist and educator who has studied the New England coastline. She is the regional education manager for the North Shore with the Trustees. She is in charge of volunteer programming. She holds community engagement opportunities for people to connect and share their love of the coast. She is majorly passionate about mentoring others to find their path in science, environmental, and education fields. She is trying to take the goals of the Trustees, that their objective is to respond to a changing coast, and invite opportunities for people to engage through curiosity, investigation, outdoor skill building, and volunteering. And so with that, she is here to connect with our audience of environmental educators, our interest in being able to reach students and empower them with a love of learning. And I am more than grateful to be able to have her speak to you all. And so you don't have to deal with my bad tech skills anymore. She's in charge, and Nina is here as well. But thank you for coming, and I'll hand it off to you, Val.
Thank you so much, and hello, everyone. I'm Val, the seaweed gal, like Hannah said, and thanks for that beautiful introduction. And I've gotten to work with Nina for many years as part of this great organization we're part of, NEOSEC, which I'll mention in just a moment. But yeah, I was so excited to be invited to speak with you all. I'm really passionate about sharing, my work with others and hopefully inspiring others. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started. And to the right slide. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yeah, great. So yeah, I hope to share with you today how I try to inspire a love of nature in others through experiential learning. And I've got some photos of my work at the Trustees here, but I'll be sharing both my work at the Trustees and some work I did previously at some other jobs as well. But before we get into me, I just want us to do a little kind of icebreaker and learn a little bit about you. And like I said, I'm super passionate about this work, and I bet all of you are as well if you're here on a weeknight, taking time away from your busy schedule. So I wanted to ask you to brainstorm something that you're passionate about. It could be, related to our watershed education topic here or something else. And then one thing that you are curious about. So I'll give everyone some time to do that, and then we can share how we bring that curiosity and passion to our work. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then maybe we can share out.
Do you want us to put that in the chat, Val, or are you looking for us to unmute and share?
I think either way, yeah, if folks
Okay.
feel more comfortable in the chat, I can see the chat so I can check out responses there, or if anyone would just like to unmute and chime in, feel free.
I could chime in to start us off. I'm Heather. I'm with Connecticut Island Sailing Foundation. And one thing that I've become really passionate about recently is fishing and aquaculture in general. I think it's so cool. And I'm curious to know why you're the seaweed gal.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather, sorry. Fishing and aquaculture is something I'm really interested in too. Especially seaweed aquaculture, as you might imagine. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so, and I will share a little more about this later, but I am Val the Seaweed Gal because my background is in marine science, and I studied coastal ecology and in particular seaweeds for my research. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later. And then after that, I just was like, wow, seaweed is so cool. I might as well, be the seaweed gal. Yeah.
Fair enough. Awesome.
Anybody else want to share something they're passionate about lately?
I'll talk to you for a minute. My name is Bill O'Halloran. I'm a retired foot and ankle surgeon in Colorado. My undergraduate degree is in zoology, and before I took up the medical business, I taught high school for 4 years. So the only reason I quit high school teaching was because I couldn't afford to buy groceries. And so now that I'm retired, I've come kind of full circle back to my zoology roots, and started doing some stuff with an NGO in Iceland. Last year I was out, my dad was on the first crew of the Nautilus, so we came out for an event, and I'm walking through Stonington and I see this place called NESS, and I'm like, it's kind of interesting. So I found out about NESS, and then through them I found out that Community Sailing of Colorado, which is an educational program here, was working with them. So I've taken up with Community Sailing of Colorado, and trying to get back into the teaching things. So, if you take a 50-year hiatus, things change. So I'm I get very excited about the NESS protocols and their work with NOAA. So here I am.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. I just think of sailing as ocean, so I never even would have thought there was sailing programs in Colorado. So that's wonderful. But of course you can sail on a lake too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, Colorado's a pretty strange world. We have the most per capita land scuba divers of any landlocked state. Have several lakes that have pretty good sailing presence. One of our guys actually won the Mutineer Nationals from here. We've had Hobie 16 guys go and win the Worlds. Another fun factoid is that in the early 1900s, Sir Thomas Lipton came through Denver, and he was having dinner at the Brown Palace, and some guy said, well, we have a yacht club, and it's the Grand Lake Yacht Club. It's the highest yacht club in the world. And he said, that is awesome. You need a cup. And so every August they race for a Lipton Cup that's every bit as grandiose as the America's Cup. So that's,
Awesome.
I could go on and on, but it's your show, so I'll just be quiet.
Well, thanks, Bill, for sharing your passion. And it looks like Hannah said she loves getting students out on the water, as do I. And Nina's very passionate about caring for and learning about animals. Oh, and curious about animal behavior. Yeah, me too. Bringing hands-on learning to my students. Lisa, awesome. Yep. Love the hands-on stuff. That's the best way I learn. teaching and bringing science to your students. That's awesome, Claudia. Thank you. Awesome. Well, I'm not going to read all of these, but I really appreciate all of you contributing. And it sounds like you all have a lot of the same passions I do. And looks like we have some curiosities too. Curious how to get students to interact more with their environment. Awesome. Hopefully I'll give you some ideas for that today. So yeah, thank you all for doing a little interaction right off the bat there. And I'll jump in and give you a little more background about myself now. If my slide chooses to advance. There we go. For today, my goal for the session is to share ways that you can use inquiry-based learning and experiential learning to enhance your curriculum and inspire learners to, have a relationship with their environment. And so I'm gonna give you a little background on myself and my educational philosophy, share what I do at the Trustees, share some strategies for how you can apply what I'm talking about to your work, and then give you some example projects and then have time for questions. And I want to just emphasize that all the work I shared today is super collaborative. And so I want to thank all the fellow staff, volunteers, and students who've helped me with this work over the years. So who am I? I am Val Perini, or Val the Seaweed Gal. And like I said, I have a background in marine biology, studying seaweed, and that's where I got my nickname. So I went to college at Northeastern and to grad school there. And I focused on biology and marine biology. And I did some different internships while at Northeastern. And then for grad school, I did coastal ecology research. So you can see me here in the field. That's my field experiment. I did some nutrient, like I was studying nutrients and how they impact life in the intertidal zone. So things like nitrogen and phosphorus. And so this is like a little nutrient dispenser where I added some nutrients and then saw how the seaweed would grow and that sort of thing. And then I got to do some lab work as well. So here's me in my lab coat studying the levels of nutrients in the seaweeds. So, how much nitrogen and phosphorus is in the seaweed throughout the year. And my study was like a long-term study where I looked at these nutrient levels throughout the year over 3 years. So it was cool to see the fluctuations with seasonality and that sort of thing. And so I was doing research, but at the same time, I was doing some internships at the Vancouver Aquarium, at Northeastern, and most of the internships were more education focused. And so I learned after I graduated with my master's that I think I like teaching maybe better than doing the research, right? I still, I'm a science geek. I love science, but I think I like telling people about science more than doing it perhaps. And so since I graduated, my career has really been focused on science, education, and communication. And I've done that at a variety of places. At Northeastern, where I worked for years for their outreach program, leading like field trips and summer camps and stuff like that. But then I also worked at other institutions like the Museum of Science, some local colleges, that sort of thing. So I just kind of did a lot of jobs for a while to kind of get a feel of, what I liked to do and that sort of thing. And I love sharing that with students because it helps them understand that it's not necessarily a straight path all the time, right? You can kind of try out different things as you go. How did all these experiences kind of inform my educational philosophy? What I've learned is that for me, education is not the filling of a pot, but the lighting of a fire. I love this quote because, I know that I don't like to learn by memorizing, I like to learn by getting out and doing things. And those experiences spark passion and curiosity. And so, when I'm thinking about teaching and kind of how I show up to my job, I like to stay passionate, stay curious, never stop learning and collaborating, and of course have fun. So you can see me in the field being goofy here. One of my favorite things to do is make seaweed wigs, which is maybe why I got my nickname as well. Or seaweed jewelry. You can kind of tie the seaweed around your ankles or wrists. And it's a fun way to get kids more comfortable with seaweed, right? People like think it's kind of gross, but if it's right on your wrist, you got to be comfortable with it, right? And then here I am in the field just being silly in the marsh as well. And so I think if you bring passion and curiosity to your teaching, then that'll be contagious and your students will also share that passion and curiosity. So I want to give you a little background on the place I work now, the Trustees and the Crane Estate, just to give some context for, how we do experiential learning there. And so if you're not familiar, which probably most of you aren't because the Trustees is an organization up here in Massachusetts, but it is a land conservation organization. And our mission is to preserve for public use and enjoyment places of exceptional scenic, historic, and ecological value. So that for public use and enjoyment part is a really important part of our mission, because we're different than, say, like a wildlife refuge that's preserving land just for nature. We're doing it both for the nature and for people to come and enjoy it. We are actually the oldest and largest statewide land conservation organization in the country, founded way back in 1891 because our founder knew that there was too much development going on and we needed to preserve green space. And we have more than 120 reservations throughout Massachusetts. So if you get to visit, try to go to a trustee's property. There's some little quip that if you're in Massachusetts, you're never more than a half hour from a trustee's property, and they're all beautiful hiking trails, historic homes, that kind of thing. And so we have all these great places, and so we think of them as experiential classrooms. So we've got 120 of these beautiful experiential classrooms all over the state where we can do education. And so I work at this place called the Crane Estate. This is an aerial view of the property. It's a 2,100 acre property that includes a 3.5 mile barrier beach here. About 600 acres is this part, which is a National Historic Landmark. It's the estate of the Cranes. That's why it's called Crane Estate. And then tons of salt marsh back here and estuary. All of this is also included in the property. So as a marine scientist and an educator, this is like an amazing playground for me to get to educate folks on. Here's another view, just a map view of the property. We've got tons of dune trails where we bring learners. We do boat and kayak trips out to this island. And then we're at the mouth of a couple of rivers. So we can really look at the difference between open ocean and rivers and all kinds of stuff. So it's a great place to do environmental education. And so how do we do our work? We have field trips and guided tours. We have family programs. We have professional development for volunteers and educators. We have a summer camp, and then we have different internship and volunteer opportunities that I'll tell you a little more about. And so, what are some of the topics we can teach about? We have a whole lesson around sand and how there's really a story in the sand. And one of the things we like to talk about is how the coast is always changing, right? The sands are always shifting. And by studying the sand, using microscopes, sand sieves, keys that help us identify the minerals in the sand, we can really get an idea of how this beach formed over time. And of course, we're talking a lot about erosion and coastal processes when we are studying the sand. And this is a graphic that shows some data from both students and volunteers actually help us measure the slope of the beach throughout the year. And then we're able to track how the beach changes, and that helps with management and stuff like that. And of course, all these changes we see in the sand are related to coastal change and sea level rise and increased storms and that sort of thing. So it's a good opportunity to both get more familiar with the sand and the habitat, but then also talk about how it's changing. Other topics, we do ecology and biodiversity. So we'll go out in the salt marsh, study the plants. We'll do water quality testing. We study invasive species like green crabs. So set a crab trap and count, measure, that sort of thing. We even bring the crabs back to the castle and cook them sometimes and do culinary events with our green crabs, or maybe bring some green crab soup to summer camp. All the summer campers know me as the crab lady and the seaweed gal because I'm always making crab stew for the campers to try. And then something that's really unique about working for the trustees is that it's not just about kind of the science and the nature. The trustees also focuses on art and cultural preservation. And so that's been really cool for me to be able to have kind of a more interdisciplinary approach to my education and incorporate things like archaeology, art and history, indigenous ways of life, and that sort of thing. So I love that our education programs are super interdisciplinary because we're doing both kind of the art, history, and culture, but also the science and nature. This project right here, this is actually the rudder of a more than 100-year-old schooner that is wrecked on the beach. So we have a shipwreck here on the property, and this is our state underwater archaeologist, and he has collaborated with us to develop some education programming around the shipwreck. And one of the resources I shared with Hannah is like a little explorer's journal that we use for studying the shipwreck. So that's a good example of like some of the collaborations we've been able to have. And then I've been really excited to learn more about Indigenous ways of life and partner with Indigenous educators. And this summer, we're going to have an Indigenous educator who's going to come and build a fish weir with us, similar to the ones that the Pawtucket people would have used to catch fish in this area when they lived here. So, my hope for any outdoor classroom is that the outdoor classroom and this kind of outdoor experiential learning will be interdisciplinary. So bringing in multiple topics, subject areas, that kind of thing. We hope to make it inclusive, making everyone feel like they belong, and also providing multiple points of entry, so that if you're not up for a hike yet, maybe you do something a little easier. All our programs are very tied to place, so we're helping students to develop a sense of place, in their local environment. And then we try to make all our programming really connected to careers. So I created this cool video, STEAM careers at Crane, because there's a lot of different expertise at a big property like this. There are people who are historians, there are people who are more like land conservation, background in like wildlife management. There are people like me with more of a marine biology background. So lots of expertise, and a great opportunity to show young people that there's lots of careers related to, being outdoors and that sort of thing. And so part of what we did to kind of guide our outdoor education programming and our coastal education programming is we developed these things that we call the Crane Coastal Literacy Principles. And as Hannah mentioned, you might be familiar with the ocean literacy principles, or there's also environmental literacy principles. And so we pulled from those different principles, and we pulled from the curriculum frameworks for science, and we created our own principles for what we think people should learn when they visit the Crane Estate. And as you can see, they're pretty simple. Like number one is my favorite. The coast is always changing. It's something that you can observe every time you come to the beach, that it's a little different, right? The sands have shifted. Or, many habitats support a diversity of life, right? That's a lot of people's favorite one because it talks about the plants and the animals that live here, that sort of thing. So these have sub-concepts and examples, and I have them in a table that are linked to the curriculum frameworks, and I've shared those with Hannah so that you all can access them. And it's just a good framework that we use, when we're developing a new program, make sure it kind of connects to this.
And yep,
Yeah.
team, that should be in the chat for you. So as Val's speaking, if you want to poke at it, that should be that reference link.
Thank you. I think that one is a different link, but yeah, that's okay. This one I sent to you, Hannah, just like as a PDF. So I don't know if later like those will be available to people or something, but
Oh, okay. Yep. I'll share it out in the Google Classroom.
perfect. Thank you. And yeah, I'll get this curriculum I'll talk about later. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now that I've told you about a little bit of the experiential learning we do at Crane, I wanted to just kind of highlight like what elements I think are important, you know, when you're kind of trying to do experiential learning and outdoor learning, and how can you apply these elements to your work. So I think strategies for, you know, the outdoor classroom for, you know, creating good experiences are making sure your lessons are connected to place. And that allows learners to develop a sense of place. You know, so understanding the history of the place you're at sometimes connects to that, right? Or how the land has been used in the past. Hands-on and inquiry-based. So someone already said they love hands-on learning, me too. You know, I think everyone loves using tools, learning how to use tools, like developing those skills. So that's always nice to give folks new skills and new tools to use. And then I just love inquiry-based learning, which if you're not familiar, basically just means learning by asking questions and using our curiosity. So you know, asking our learners, what do you notice? What do you wonder? What are you curious about? And then how can we communicate what we learn to others? We try to make all of our stuff connected to curriculum frameworks so that educators can, you know, use it and kind of justify, you know, using these lessons because they are connected to curriculum frameworks. Making sure your lessons are grounded in the subject matter. And I like to do this by collaborating with experts in the field. So like I said, I collaborate with our state underwater archaeologist, or I'll collaborate with our trustees ecologists to learn, you know, what's the latest project they're working on, and then tie that back to our education programs. And I like to include opportunities for learners to interact with data. So I mentioned that beach profile measurement project. That's a very, you know, data-driven activity where the students are taking measurements, writing down data, doing math, and then they can bring it back to the classroom and graph it, that sort of thing. But even though data can be a little scary, it's pretty straightforward because the graph you make literally shows you the shape of the beach. So it's kind of like a nice visual when you can get a graph that then is related physical, tangible thing in your environment. I like to make programs learner-centered, you know, so the lessons are flexible and learners have the freedom to explore their passions and interests. So don't make it too rigid, you know, maybe don't try to plan too much, right? Because then people are rushing to get through. And, you know, maybe allow some choice, you know, in the lessons. And then I like when there's multiple entry points, you know, so like I said, if someone has never hiked in the dunes before and they, you know, might be a little uncomfortable, like, oh, maybe they can do a different activity or something like that. And then differentiated to serve various learning styles, you know, so incorporating not just one method of teaching, right? Like not just verbal, but verbal and visual aids, or, you know, not just talking, but talking and doing. So different strategies for that. And then, you know, of course, tailoring your lessons for your age group. So younger learners, you know, we focus more on nature exploration, creativity and curiosity, but with older learners, maybe we're getting into data collection, climate resilience, communication and advocacy. And then hopefully with all these programs, we're inviting learners to think about their relationship to nature, history, the arts, you know, all the topics we're teaching about. And then this is one of my favorite resources that I share with all my educators who I work with. And they're just questions that you can use in the field, you know, or in the classroom to inspire curiosity and to kind of do that inquiry-based learning. My teaching methods are very grounded in asking a lot of questions, you know, or even if a student asks you a question, you can flip it back on them and say, well, what do you think? You know, what do you think about that? And it also takes the pressure off the educator, right? If you're asking the students the questions, right? So that's good. I've talked for a little while, so I thought it would be fun to do a little inquiry activity. And so I'm just gonna try to see everyone. Okay, now I can see people. So I wanted you to, if you can, grab an object from your home or office, or really some people might be in the office still, and maybe try to grab one that you're like less familiar with, that you don't look at that often, or that you just got. And then grab a piece of paper and do a little sketch of that object. Or if you don't like drawing, you could just list the things you observe about it, you know, list a couple things, and then list, you know, if you maybe have a question about it. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And as some background, we like to do this. We have a box of curiosities, we call them, and it's like, you know, things like wasp nest or like a deer antler or like all these, you know, kind of things we've found in nature, like bird's nest and stuff. And we'll pass all those out and ask learners to do this activity with those. So yeah, I'll give you a second to find something, and I'm gonna do the same. I don't want to rush anyone, but if anyone would like to share, either your drawing or just, what your object was and something new you noticed about it, feel free.
I can go quickly to get us started.
Great.
I picked an object that I know what it is, but a lot of people don't know what it is when they walk in. And it's this glass jar. I don't know what to call this. Bottle. There we go. Full of colorful string. And so a lot of people are like, what is the purpose of this? And so their questions are why, and the function, and how did it get made? And so it's just a repurposed bottle. I don't even remember what it was from. And as I embroider, do some crafts around the holidays, I stick all my ends, all my extras that I can't do anything with it in here. And it's just to look pretty. But they always, because of the narrow tube, they're like, are you sticking something in there? Is it to hold something up? Like they try to identify a function, a purpose for it besides just looking nice on a shelf. And I think that's so funny. So they kind of do this activity on their own in my own space, Val, without your prompting, which was really a fun tie-in. So this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share what object they chose and maybe like something new you noticed about it or a question you have about it?
I can share real quick. You mentioned deer antler, and I recently got a deer skull. So I grabbed that, and I recently noticed while like trying to draw it, because I was looking at the like antler, there's a second growth here that looks like it's like it almost looked like it was trying to grow a third antler in a way. So I thought that was cool. Oh gosh, I almost
Cool.
dropped it.
Yeah, and that was perfect. I love that you said when I drew it, I noticed something new about it, right? So that's why sometimes, drawing something or like looking at it closely can, elicit more information. And then that gets us thinking critically, right? You're like, oh, I wonder what was going on there, so it's a great
Definitely.
example. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, being super observant about things for sure. Awesome.
Well, I found this on my, I can get it up there.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah, we couldn't hear you even though you were unmuted. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
okay. Like, I was looking around and I found this reef fish, and I realized the only thing I knew about him was that he was pretty and he was a reef fish. But I have no idea, which class of fishes he belongs to or that much about him. I was looking at the mouth and I was wondering, based on the mouth, what does this fish eat? So we know that some fish eat other fishes. This guy looks like a grazer to me, but I'm gonna have to go do a little research to figure it out. Then I tried to draw him and found out that I'm really a fairly poor artist, but it was kind of fun.
Looks great. What are you talking about? Looks great. Yeah.
So anyway, that was the curiosity from my den here.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that you made an observation and then it led to a question once again, right? So you observed the mouth and then said, oh, what does that fish eat? That's perfect. Thank you. And I think Sarah was trying to share.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm in the office and on my desk there's this bell and I never really thought about it because I never purchased this bell. I don't know where it came from. So now that I actually thought about it, I'm thinking someone owned this and put it on their desk because it meant something to them and they wanted it while they were working as a reminder of something. So now I'm thinking like, whose is this? What does it mean? Why is it here? There's a lot of questions I have about it, but it's still gonna live on my desk.
Thank you. That was perfect and actually made me think of something new about like our shipwreck programs and like when you think about like the history of a place or of an object, right? So, you know, what other humans have interacted with it, and what is the story behind that object. So yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for doing another little interaction. I think we'll keep moving on. And now I'm going to share a bunch of examples from my work, mostly collaborative projects that I've done, hopefully as a way to show you how you can collaborate in order to meet your goals. So I'm going to share how we can kind of you know, partner to build connections to your existing curriculum. You know, maybe have a deeper collaboration where there are multiple lessons or visits to a field site. You know, kind of non-traditional ways of connecting with students, like after school or service learning projects. And then even talking about how to, you know, get grants to support this kind of work. I'm probably not gonna actually show the video, even though we got the sound to work, just because I'm worried I'm running behind. But we'll put a link to this video in the chat. And this is a really awesome project that my colleague Bill, who is a middle school teacher, did for many years, where he brought his whole class, the whole 8th grade, to Crane Beach. And he would, it would be a trip that he really prepared the students for throughout the year by assigning them to teams. So they were on data collection teams, and then they were all deployed the day of the trip to collect all kinds of data, from water quality to the shape of the beach to, you know, pulling a net and catching fish and crabs and that sort of thing. And so it was really a way to, you know, get the kids to be scientists out there on the beach and be doing the same kind of, you know, monitoring that some researchers are doing. And it's a great example because it brings together the whole grade. You know, even people who didn't have Bill as a teacher went on the trip. And so check out that video if you can. And then another great example of a teacher project is this teacher, Tony Wilbur, who kind of similar to Bill's middle school project, but with Bill's project, he just brings the students once and they do all of the data collection in one day. In this example, the teachers bring the students maybe 4 times throughout the year to the same site, and they visit and collect data on all different aspects of our property. And then the students make these really meaningful projects that actually become like a resource. So this is an example of one of the projects where the students collected a lot of, you know, photos and kind of documenting biodiversity. And then this is an example of how they documented the shape of the beach and how it changed throughout the year. And you can tell that they are following my advice and having fun as well as doing their work. So I love that about this project. Another project or, you know, thing I've worked on here at Crane is I developed a field training course for volunteers. So it was a course that met on evenings and weekends. I got guest speakers to come and deliver lectures and do field sessions. And it was basically a crash course in coastal habitats and environmental education in order to train our volunteers to be ambassadors, stewards, and citizen scientists. And this model has been replicated on Martha's Vineyard as another trustees property as a teen leadership program. So the teens meet once a month for a training session. And then at the end of the, you know, 4 or 6 month course, they're, you know, kind of certified as ambassadors to be able to help us with the various projects. Another thing that we do that I think is a great way to engage learners in science is community science, or some people call it citizen science or volunteer science. So that's when, you know, volunteers and students, basically non-scientists, are getting out and collecting data. So we do a lot of monitoring here at the Crane Estate. And these volunteers and learners have been collecting data for 3 to 6 years, depending on the project. So it's really cool that we're building a long-term data set. And, you know, one benefit of this program is that it's, you know, building data literacy, building science literacy, basically getting people to think like scientists. And then another good thing is that we're actually collecting data that the scientists don't have time to collect. You know, scientists are busy, they don't have all the time in the world. So if we help them collect data, then that data can be used for management and conservation. And some of these projects, you know, we're just collecting the data, you know, and we kind of keep it in our own database, but then other projects we use apps. And so the data is actually contributed to these, you know, big international databases. So you might have heard of iNaturalist. That's a great one where you can collect biodiversity data out in the field just by taking a picture of a plant or an animal and then uploading it. And then the app actually helps you identify the plant or animal. And then once your observation is verified, you're helping monitor biodiversity in that area. So the data is actually used by scientists to track, you know, how species populations are changing and that sort of thing. And eBird is similar to iNaturalist, where you can collect data on birds you see. MyCoast is a way to collect data on coastal flooding and storms. And then CleanSwell is one to track marine debris. So all of these apps, you all could use anytime. You could recommend them to your students to use anytime. And you're, you know, you're participating in scientific data collection. So it's pretty cool. And another thing I love about these projects, these community science projects, is we have the data that we can then share with teachers, you know, who want to maybe take the data back to their classroom and compare their data to our long-term data set, that kind of thing. This is another cool project that we did where we collaborated with some kind of designers to create these climate futures signs. So if you look closely, this lists something that is going to happen in the future, 2057. So it says access to this island will be limited to a few hours a day due to twice daily flooding. So you can see this is like a little tidal bridge behind the sign. And now it floods maybe at the extreme high tides, the king tides, but by 2057, you know, based on estimates, it'll flood twice a day. And so these are placed all around trustees' properties to kind of give people a sense of how climate change is going to impact these special places that we love. And it really stops you in your tracks, you know, when you're standing on solid ground and it says, well, in 20 years, this will be underwater, you know, so it really gives people an idea of impacts of climate. And then this is another kind of crowdsourced citizen science type thing where we have a photo frame and people can take a picture of the same spot. And so then we can see how it changes. And this really relates to that coastal literacy principle I mentioned, how the coast is always changing, right? So by collecting these images, we can monitor those changes. And my intern currently is doing this project now at other sites at the Crane Estate. So this is like a cool thing that, you know, a student could do just by, you know, putting up a sign and saying, you know, take a picture here and use this hashtag, right? So this is a cool example of like something, yeah, like a student could do as a project. This has been one of my favorite projects of my career. This was back when I was working at Northeastern University. We partnered with Lynn Public Schools to bring sixth graders and middle schoolers, I think both 6th and 7th grade, to 3 different coastal habitats throughout the year. So, and we created this curriculum, and that was the link that Hannah put in the chat. So this is a really amazing resource, this School to See Coastal Habitats curriculum. It has lessons about the salt marsh, the rocky shore, and the sandy beach, and it includes pre-visit activities, post-visit activities, data sheets, field guides, all in this PDF that Hannah put in the chat. And it's all linked to state curriculum frameworks. And I know you all aren't necessarily in Massachusetts, but the Massachusetts frameworks are very similar to the NGSS. So I think it would be pretty aligned to all your frameworks as well if you're using NGSS. This was a really cool project because it was grant funded and we actually collaborated with teachers. So teachers from Lynn Public Schools were paid to help us develop the curriculum and to coordinate the field trips. And so it was like a cool professional development opportunity for the teachers, but then also a great way to, you know, just get all of these urban youth out to coastal habitats. And it was really meaningful. You know, these kids live right on the coast, but they probably had not visited these places before. So it was really cool to get them out. And great that we were able to use the grant funding to develop this resource that is now, you know, able to be used and disseminated. And we even were able to use grant funding to do an evaluation. So we worked with like a professional evaluator to do surveys and that sort of thing. And I'd say this is a great example of just like a, you know, like collaboration between like a science institution and a school. And I really enjoyed that it was very collaborative in that way. And then this, again, one of my favorite projects that I've worked on is the Beach Sisters program, which was also back when I was at Northeastern. It was a collaboration between Northeastern and Girls Inc. of Lynn. And so the goal was to share resources of the university with underserved youth in Lynn. And it was a peer mentorship model. So these girls you see are called the peer leaders, and they were trained, and then they would teach the younger girls and do project-based learning projects. And so some of the really cool achievements that they made, the girls, were they actually got a plastic bag ban passed in Lynn. So they were able to go to the State House, advocate for their work. They were able to actually have a bunch of reusable bags printed and pass them out at local food pantries. They also did a tree planting project to work on, you know, solutions to urban heat. And then as part of a NOAA marine debris grant, we actually were able to paint storm drain murals in Lynn, you know, to help curb pollution and littering. So great example, once again, of a collaboration for an after-school program. And then a project I'm working on right now that's like a teen leadership program are called the Climate Cafes. And so these are events where teens are leading discussions about climate out in the community. So you can see a picture here of one of those types of events. So a teen would be at the table leading the discussion, and then there would be community members, and there's, you know, kind of small table discussions going on around the room. And the topics are, you know, related to climate, like sea level rise, you know, marine debris. We're doing one soon on erosion and storms at the Crane Estate. And these really empower teens to, you know, take a leadership role. And also they empower the community to learn more about climate issues and take action. Because we find a lot of people are now kind of concerned about climate, but in climate change, but they don't really know what to do or where to go for info. So this is a great way to do that. And like I said, it's all teen led, and you can learn more about it through climate on this website. And I just happen to be one of the hosts, but like I said, the teens lead it all, which is great. And so how do you find all these partners? You know, like I'm talking about how important partnerships are, and I will just say, get out there, right? Join professional networks like the New England Ocean Science Education Collaborative, which is the one I mentioned that me and Nina are both reps for. So that's, you know, how we can connect with other organizations like us. But then there's also plenty of, you know, associations or professional memberships for teachers, like NAAA is the Association for Environmental Education, and then there are regional chapters. There's one, I listed the Massachusetts and the Connecticut ones, and then the National Marine Education Association, which is actually having their annual conference this summer in Boston. So check it out if you can join us. I'm helping to organize that. And then there are regional chapters of the NMEA as well, Southern New England Marine Educators and Massachusetts Marine Educators. And then all this community science work I mentioned, you know, like the volunteer data collection, there are networks of people doing that. So if you end up doing community science, definitely join one of those networks because people share data, protocols, and resources. And then I'll say that, you know, in-person networking is always the most fruitful. Like most of these collaborations I talked about, I've, you know, met people in person by attending a conference, maybe a training, an educator meetup. And then if you're an informal educator and you want to connect to teachers, I like to attend, you know, school career fairs, science fairs, teacher professional development days. And then there are teacher professional networks as well, like the Massachusetts Teacher Association or the Massachusetts Association of Science Teachers. And I'm sure there are similar ones in your states as well. I think I'm out of time, and so I don't know if we have time for my concluding reflection, but I just kind of wanted to, you know, wrap up and say thank you and, you know, kind of invite you to think about what has resonated with you and how you might employ these strategies in your work. So I'll just let you reflect on that on your own, and I'll say thank you and see if you have any questions.
Wow, Val, I cannot, like, I'm still like understanding everything that you've done, and it's amazing. And I know you are one of the most humble people I've ever heard. Every time you share a new project, you're like, oh, it's a collaboration. Oh, this, and you're like, I'm so lucky. You are the common denominator in almost everything you showed us today. You are driving some immense change in the world. And I know it takes a team, and I know that's awesome, but like, this is just so motivating. So I have one quick question for you. It's kind of a two-parter, and especially for teachers, right? This is the time of year we're getting a little bit tired. We're ready to keep going for the rest of the year. How do you stay motivated to share all this work? And what, I guess it doesn't quite go well together, but what guidance would you want to tell someone if they're in their early career with education? How would they stay motivated and excited to do this?
Yeah, great questions. I think just coming back to the pieces that I love, like being outdoors. Sorry. Yeah, coming back to the pieces that I love, which are, you know, being outdoors, and just, you know, all of the little beautiful intricacies of nature, you know, so, you know, kind of what you all were sharing when we did the little observations. You know, if I start to get too, you know, busy or bogged down or I have too many emails or something, I just try to, you know, get outside and kind of come back to my roots and remember why I'm doing this. Yeah. And then advice for someone early in their career. I would say that that last slide I shared about just getting out there and, you know, not being afraid to talk to people in person, or pick up the phone, or, you know, send a blind email to someone who you really admire, you know, they might write back and become your mentor, right? So, I think sometimes nowadays we're all a little like shy or behind the screen or something. So I would say just keep doing those in-person interactions, because I think that's where I've gotten the most kind of like traction and made the most good connections, is when I am able to connect with people, you know, in person. And yeah.
Absolutely. Hence you coming today, you're Nina. So that's awesome.
Exactly.
And like
Yeah.
you embody curiosity, and your enthusiasm is infectious. And you said that earlier. I think you said if you're curious, the curiosity will be contagious for your students. And so you're doing an amazing job. So thanks for answering my questions. Do you guys have any? I know that we are over 6, so I want to be mindful of your time. It's okay if you have to go, but we'll stay on just for a couple more minutes so you can interact and engage and ask away.
First of all, I completely agree with you, Hannah. Fantastic, everything that you have been doing in general, Val. I just had one quick question. When you were talking about how like community members measure the slope of your coastal, like how do they exactly do that? I don't know if maybe it's a longer question, but I don't totally understand, I guess, how they would do that in general.
Yeah, it is a little, it takes like a second to wrap your head around. And even when I explain it, each time I explain it, which now I've explained it like 100 times, you know, to kids, but I kind of have to like remind myself first and then explain it to them, because it is a bit of a complicated procedure. But basically you have two poles and a string that goes between the two poles. And so if the beach is sloped, you know, one pole is going to be sitting lower than the other pole. And you're going to stretch the string though, so that it's level between the two poles. And so the difference where the string falls on pole 1 versus pole 2 is the change in elevation. And we have the poles marked, you know, with centimeter marks. So the kids say, okay, my string is at 90 centimeters and your string is at 80. And so there's a 10 centimeter change in elevation between this, these two measurement points. And then they move the pole to the next spot and do the next 3 meters. And they measure it every 3 meters going down the beach.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, and that link that Hannah sent, the Coastal Habitats curriculum, has the protocol and the data sheet for that activity. And it even lists the materials. And I will say most of the activities I described, like I buy the materials like at like Home Depot or like a pet store, or like, you know, like you can get most of the stuff just like, you know, out, you know, at regular stores.
Definitely. Well, I live right next to a Home Depot, so that's perfect.
Yeah, so we make the elevation rods ourselves just out of like PVC.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Val. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, if anyone has any follow-up questions, Nina and Hannah have my contact info, and feel free to share it with folks, and yeah, be happy to connect with anyone who wants advice for incorporating these ideas into your work.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough, Val. You'll be hearing it from me for days, but thank you so much for coming. Anything that's referenced today, and I'll get the right link that was originally referenced earlier. It will all be available on the Google Classroom. If you are having challenges with that, let me know. I'm happy to either send it to you in an email or give you access. We might just have to change the domain, the email address you're using. And then most of these things will be available on the tackle box when we release this year's as well. So you can poke through previous presenters. They've shared some resources similar to Val's in the past. And so she will be up there in history when we release it. You guys get the lucky sneak peek coming to the sessions live to have it a couple weeks early. So thank you so much again. I'll be in touch for next Wednesday's third and final speaker session. And if you are coming in person or you still haven't registered, I'm happy to help you out with that. And maybe I will see you on April 27th. So enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.